I grew up in South Philadelphia. We didn't realize it was segregated. All we knew is that our neighborhood was all black, and we weren't even that conscious of color because the people who owned the store down the street were black, the tailor, the restaurant owners, the undertaker, everybody in the neighborhood, and it was a very small street. Everybody worked, blue collar essentially, very close-knit neighborhood. Everyone had over 4 children. We played in the streets together. On Saturday morning, our parents came out and the hucksters came around and our parents purchased things. We had to go buy ice because there were no refrigerators then. We had a coal stove, so the younger kids were responsible for putting wood and coal into the stove and keeping it going. And the level interest in education was just profound. I mean, even to this day, I don't think I've ever had such a positive educational experience than I did in my first 6 years, because school was an integral part of the community. We had a black superintendent, a black principal, all the teachers were black. Many of them didn't live in the neighborhood either. Contrary to popular belief, they were middle-income people who lived elsewhere. But their hearts and their souls were into those kids. I remember that third grade and fourth grade plays were always conducted in the evenings so that parents could attend. And an auditorium that seated maybe 400, 500 people was standing room only for a third and fourth grade play. Up until 1959, 78% of all black families had a man and a woman in them. That's a fact. Teen pregnancy was looked down upon. Sexual activity among kids, everyone bragged about it, no one did it. And but if someone became pregnant, if there was an aunt in the South, they would go there, so that the moral standards and ethical standards for people living in those communities was extremely high. It had little to do with your income. Many of us were poor without realizing that we were poor. During the war years, I thought everyone had one pair of shoes. Today, I have a lot of shoes because of those early experiences. You know, you put cardboard in your shoes when your soles were worn out. You never went to your mother and said, "Mom, my shoes need to be replaced or fixed." You just knew that the money wasn't there for that. So you got the thickest piece of cardboard you can find and put it in your shoes. And if it didn't rain, you could last for 2 days. The discipline was in the community. I mean, you didn't speak back to an adult. The thought of an elderly person being disrespected was just unheard of. And teachers were never disrespected. And if you misbehaved, you would be spanked by a neighbor. And when your mother got home or father got home, you were spanked there. And God forbid a teacher should ever have to send for your parents, and they had to take off work. That was it. And so it imposed a kind of discipline. And again, it was a discipline that had little to do with how much money you made. There was a sense of comfort, a sense of well-being, a sense of oneness between the school and the community. The early days, civil rights was not an issue. The black colleges gave kids like me, a high school dropout, who dropped out with 3 months after my 17th birthday, and then went into the military and got introduced to learning there, got on flying status, went to a really nice military school, learned airborne electronics, did some flying with the military, and then finished my high school education there, and was told that I could enter any college in the country because of my scores, but I lacked the kind of confidence. But the black colleges, my college, Cheney State College, I think reached out to me. It was a warm environment. It was almost a continuation of the kind of warm and accepting environment I experienced in the black schools in my native Philadelphia and my old neighborhood. Cheney was a continuation of that kind of loving experience, but it was tough. I remember I entered with 13 other veterans, and we were given some priority in admissions because it was thought that we were mature. Our grades weren't that great, And so we were placed on academic probation, but over half of us made the dean's list at the end of the first year from academic probation. Many of us who exercised leadership in the civil rights movement in the early and mid-'60s, integration was never our goal. We never saw integration as a solution to the problems. We were seeking desegregation. And I think confusion on that point has continued to erode the collective self-confidence of the black community today. Just a very confusion. You see, I fought against de jure segregation. That is, when someone absolutely forbid me to go into a restaurant or live in a given housing complex, I was just restricted by law. I remember when I was discharged from the military, coming home in 1958 and standing in Florida, only person at a ticket window, and have the man stop and wait on a white person. He waited on 10 white people while I was standing there. In the meantime, I almost missed a train and couldn't check my bags. That's what I fought against, the indignity of America's apartheid system. So integration was never an issue for me or for many others.
Were you an idealist?
Oh, absolutely. A flaming idealist who had this burning desire to change things, primarily because of my early experience as someone growing up in the South and then being sort of growing up in the North and then dropped in the South in the military, facing raw segregation. I was very bitter from that experience. For 3 years after my discharge in the military, I remember my heart racing every time a red light would flash in my rearview mirror because I was arrested 3 times and imprisoned in local jails 3 times because of my activism in the South. And so those early memories really motivated me to do something about it.